with SDIC.
Yeah, Tom, my pleasure. Kind of bittersweet, but I'll see you around though. So.
Oh, I know. You know, I'm a little torn that you settled on your one commitment with MCDD. You know, we were hoping SDIC might be your home, but
Oh, it'll always be my home, my own property in Troutdale. So.
yeah, we know your loyalty.
That's right.
So, since there is not a quorum, I'm not going to do roll call. I guess when do you recommend roll call or just wait till Annalise?
It's fine either way. I think we can get started and do roll call just as usual. And then when Annalise comes, we can make note of that.
Sounds good. Good morning, all. Tom Hansel present. Ken Anderton.
Present. Sorry, I'm on this different computer and our collab is slow.
Understood. So I just wanted to welcome everybody to our January 24th Sandy Drainage Improvement Company board meeting. At this time, we are without a third board member, so we are not in quorum, but are expecting Annalise Kohler at a later time. Tammy Stephenson will be absent today. We have a full agenda today, and I'd like to again thank staff for their support of SDIC and the work we're doing. We wouldn't be here without the support from MCD staff. Randy, it looks like you're kicking us off with an operations update. It's been a while since we've seen you and heard about our operations.
Mr. Chair, do you want to introduce Steve? Oh, did he leave? There he is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can do that. I was just waiting until that time, but Steve Winkle, you're Ken's replacement from the Port of Portland. Welcome to our format today.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be part of the team here.
Yeah. When we're at the appointment item, I'll ask you to just to kind of do a little orientation. Annalise will be there and just for a little status of who you are and you know your plans for coming into the district.
Okay, great.
Regrets for messing with your agenda, Tom. I just felt like we should say hello to it. Thank you for volunteering. We're so grateful.
Yeah, I saw Steve in there, and Keith from the port reached out and just introduced Steve as well, that he would be here and coming in on Ken's coattails. And I thank the port for their ongoing support to Sandy's mission in flood safety. So again, you know, it's just, Steve, you have some big shoes. I mean, from Phil to Ken, and you know, we're just going to be impressed with Steve, I know. So
I'm always riding Ken's coattails, so you know it'll be all right.
Yeah,
be good.
That's excellent.
And
yeah,
Steve,
and
I look forward to scheduling an orientation for you. We'll get you a little more background when you have some time.
Okay, great.
So Steve, this is, you know, we meet under Robert's rules, the orientation. Wendy will do a great job, but we kind of we have a set agenda. We just move through it. Some items require motions and a second, and that's what will be. I think we have a couple of them in our agenda today. So please ask questions as you see fit. So. It's okay. Very loose, but we have structure. So thank you.
Sounds good.
Back at you, Randy.
All right. Well, thank you for having me, everybody. It's been a long time. I used to talk to SDIC fairly often. It's been a few years. So for Steve and others that maybe don't know me, I'm Randy Lyons. I'm the operations manager. So just overseeing operations and trying to set them up for success and getting them all the tools and resources they need, and kind of play as a liaison between the admin world and the field world. So feel free to reach out if you ever have any questions. And I got some slides put together, and
are you seeing those?
Yep. And you can do the next slide if you'd like. And yeah, so basically, not going too far back, kind of what's going on and looking forward and what's happened recently. This is what's happened in SDIC. So got a little picture of a beaver there chewing on a tree, just because that's kind of the day to day. If you guys tour around the ditch systems and everything out there, you're going to see a lot of beaver activity, and we live with them, not against them. So we are always finding creative ways to manage and keep water flowing. But one of the main things that has been going on is the ditch and routine maintenance. And for those of you that don't know, at least twice a week, generally on Mondays and Fridays, we are out touring all of SDIC, hitting the whole system, all the ditches, getting eyes on the culverts, removing debris, and just making sure everything's flowing the best it can be. That includes 2 guys traveling around, checking the pump stations, ditches, breaking culverts. Once every month or 2, depending on the time of the season, we'll take heavy equipment out to locations and remove debris piles, remove active beaver dams if need be in certain situations. And that within that routine maintenance, SDIC has a couple IGAs with the port and with Multnomah County. And so we kind of build those separately, but yeah, there's a lot going on out there. And I would just say overall, the system's in good shape. Everything's working pretty well. So pump station's in good shape, ditches are doing good. We really recently saw some last year, some beavers that were relocated out from, we call the TA area, just east of I-84 on the main conveyance. And that's reduced some of our efforts out there on the east end, which has been nice. Still seen some activity, but it definitely helped. So we recently just completed with Josh McNamee. He's our asset maintenance specialist. He leads all pump station work in SDIC and all the other districts, and just completed some annual testing. That includes vibration analysis, Mayer testing, and we get just detailed reports to be able to understand what kind of condition these important assets are in. So the pump station's in pretty good shape. So there's been a lot of work the last couple of years, and don't expect too much negative coming back from those reports. And I guess one of the big things I think everybody's aware of was this ice event during the holidays, / followed up with quite a bit of rain. So that was kind of a unique situation. Usually, we see snow events and stuff, but this one with the freezing and then a big rain event right on the back end, it definitely was a great opportunity for operations. The system handled really well, but it was a full-time job. So during big rainstorms, we're not only out there twice a week, we're out there for multiple days. Myself and another crew member had to come in on Christmas Eve. It wasn't an SDIC, but with some power outages at pump station 4, which is close to the SDIC boundaries. And once we came in on that Monday or Tuesday, we had a long weekend. We were out there every single day for the rest of that week, just trying to keep water flowing, removing blockages, and all that. So along with that, I know SDIC has an awesome weir structure. We definitely, during that rain event and ice event, utilized that. It operated awesome. That pump station out there can only take so much water. So that was a lot of time and effort and resources were put into that structure. And we saw that the pump station, how much rain we're getting, we shut it, and it created a lot of flood storage, which relieved some pressure on that pump station. we did get to a point where it was starting, the water was creeping up, and those two pumps couldn't keep up. So we shut that weir, and it operated really well. So I think that's a really positive thing. I think since I've been here, that's probably the second time in the last 3 years that we've had to utilize that, and it's working perfect. So it's yeah, we're just really thankful to have that structure, because without that flood storage and that structure, we'd be in rough shape. Go ahead, Tom.
Hey, Randy, on the weir, great that it was put into use. I know when we were accepting it from the contractor, there was some tolerance issues on the seat. Did that manifest at all once you had storage behind it? Does this ring a bell?
It does, yeah. And I remember they were coming back and forth fixing that. It was definitely, that was quite a few years ago, but that issue seems to be resolved. It operated and functioned perfectly. So didn't see any major leak through or anything like that. So holding back water.
And then remind me, is the protocol, in order to operate the weir, we need to collaborate with the port? Or do we have authority just to open it?
We have full authority to manage that however we want, but we do right away. As soon as we decided we were going to do that, I reached out to port managers and others that we work with that manage that site, and just let them know what's going on. So I think it's in our good nature to communicate that that's happening. That doesn't, during this time of the year, doesn't affect them too much. And maybe Bill can help me. Is it 48 hours, 72 hours? We got some air traffic control regulations with having a bunch of standing water in that area for too long.
Yeah,
we didn't reach it.
It's part of the intergovernmental agreement of when we partnered to build the weir. We also partnered to provide flood storage as part of the Troutdale Reynolds Industrial Park development, and part of that is allowing to hold back water. The only part of that is that the water has to flow through within 48 hours. It can be essentially a lake of water because it attracts birds for the Troutdale Airport. So it actually works pretty well. I've tested it this year for sure. And usually the coordination is with us, because part of the IGA is us making sure there's enough water levels within the wetlands to sustain them, as well as providing flood storage. So it's kind of a win-win we've crafted.
Yeah, and I don't want to go too far down on the tangent, but I know really in the summertime is really only when we get requests from the port staff. They're trying to keep water in there and saturated. So sometimes they'll ask us, maybe once a year can you shut that weir to hold back a little bit of water. So yeah, it's working well. So I'm probably someday in the future we'll have to cross that bridge if that it keeps raining and raining. Usually we only get 2-day big pushes, but you never know. So we'll probably have to cross that bridge and see what we got to do to keep holding water back. But didn't happen this time.
Yeah, just the fact that it was the second time operating, the IGA was written with just thought in mind. So hopefully we're looking at the IGA, and as we apply it, we continue to amend or revisit it, because I want to make sure, Randy, your team and is supported and don't feel compromised in your ability to keep the pump station operating. Thank you.
Yep. Sorry, I got a phone ringing here. 1 second. I apologize. Being in the office. What else is going on? So, and then so this is this ice rain event. The numbers that came out about rainfalls, they didn't really match up in my head, but it was a 5-year event or a little less, but there was some real big pulses of rain that definitely pushed the ditch system, pretty full capacity. But I think in the east end, there was reports of a little over 2 inches in 48 hours. But I know being out there, there was just seeing some water lines and stuff there. And there's some pictures I'll share with you, but it was a decent amount of rain, and the west end of Portland got a lot more rain, but it definitely put us into, and I don't do good with being distracted. I apologize. Let's see. But anyways, so with these events, ice event, rain / event, it's always a great opportunity for operations and engineering to kind of reflect on it. How did the system function? Trouble areas, areas of improvement, and for the most part, everything operated really well. A few little, one of the things that we don't see very often is the freezing temperatures. With that, it creates like an ice layer in the ditch system, and then once it heats up, it's hard for it to pump water because these ice sheets block our intakes on our pump stations. But it warmed up fast enough, it wasn't an issue. But one thing that we're going to look into a little further was in our oiler systems on our pumps and motors, these fluctuation of temperatures, you got to drip oil at a specific rate, and it drips a lot slower when it's cold. So we're looking into potentially heating like our reservoirs potentially to keep that more of a consistent flow. Just, this storm kind of happened on a long weekend, and we come in if we have to, but that's really when you can you got to be aware and careful. So we're talking about ways to heat our reservoirs potentially, having conversations about insulating the pump house itself, but these structures actually are not designed to be insulated. So and I get just the point is, there's a lot of good reflecting on the back end of this event, and the potential 1 or 2 action items is to be prepared for, these events that happen not so often. So, and I think we did a good job on this one. We immediately the day after, once we got kind of everything settled, we met as a group, engineering and operations, and talked through a lot of things and scenarios. So proud of our team and MCD staff on that one. So
I guess I want to share, it makes me think a lot about peak flows, because again, you could get a 48-hour 2-inch reading, but in certain places with climate change, we're seeing really intense rainfalls. And so having that trip weir and having some space to store water to get through the peak is going to be, I think, increasingly important across the entire range of the 4 districts. So sorry to editorialize, but these rain events keep me up at night. So thank you, Randy.
It's actually a good point in that when we were doing the construction of TRIP, we had Salmon Creek overtop into the mitigation area we were grading. And so it is a huge luxury to have that much flood storage and control, and it's actually probably a pretty good lesson in development of win-win scenarios when developing in the floodplain.
Yeah, I thought, and if you go to the next slide, Wendy, please. I thought, hopefully everybody can kind of see these, but I thought, these are just some photos, kind of just during and post after this last rain event. And on the left, it's the TA ditch system. It's behind TA trucking and just east of I-84 and the main conveyance. And the top left photo is just a good example of a beaver deceiver. This is one way that we work with and not against beavers. And this is the same location that some beavers were relocated this last year. But putting in this infrastructure allows these beavers to still do what they do. They build up around the cages, but the piping allows water to flow through. And then the discharge on the back, below the photo below that one is just the discharge side. We actually found a little blockage during the big rain on that side, which is really rare. There was actually like a shopping cart in the culvert, and but you find random stuff, and you got to be meticulous about when it's raining. We're checking every teeny little spot to keep water flowing, because one little blockage stuff starts backing up quick. And then in the middle, the Troutdale Airport is part of the main conveyance as well. And this runs under the whole airport, but the top middle photo, we actually recently did a repair. We had a lot of erosion in this last year behind it. And the guys went in and refortified with some eco blocks. And if you look closely, you can see this is, we showed up about, I don't know if it's like 8 in the morning, but the water levels, there were some major surges overnight and big pulses of rain. And you can see that the water was up over those eco blocks and a good foot at least. So the system had a lot of water going into it. So that's why I kind of struggle with the numbers I read. I'm like, I don't think we got 2 inches. I think we got more than that, but just from experience. And then on the right there, that's just another key critical conveyance spot. It's on Salmon Creek. This is where it goes from Salmon Creek underneath Marine Drive and by the big substation there, just on the west end of your guys's district. And when it's really flowing, then this is a good 6 inches underwater. So, and this is where it's kind of an art, not a science, right? This is main conveyance that eventually wraps right into the pump station. And so we were clearing that a lot during the day, but once we close that weir, we leave some debris and blockage there to allow for that to, if we let too much water go through, those pumps can't keep up. So we jump around and just manage it the best we can. And I think we do a pretty good job. So just some ditch, some areas and key photos of SDIC ditches I thought you might be interested in. You guys got any questions about any of that? It's all fun stuff.
I have as a new guy, I have a general question. Just kind of, what do you see out there as the single biggest challenge to SDIC's operations?
What is the biggest single challenge? I think beaver activity is one of them. I think that Troutdale Airport, that culvert where I was talking about refortifying with those eco blocks and stuff, that is a critical point that can quickly, if it gets blocked, can quickly rise and be up almost into the airport. I know that was discussed for years. That was on the CIP for the city of Troutdale, I believe, the port. And recently talking to port staff, it sounds like that's got kicked down the line a long ways. So that's a key point. And then, with the increase of this development and everything, there's so much more water going into the system that is, I think that we're in that floodplain really helps, but it's problematic. I mean, without that weir, we wouldn't be able to keep up as of today. So, in bigger rain events. So,
Okay.
yeah, I think those are the challenges, really.
Okay,
Hey,
thanks.
Randy, I know during the pandemic, you were facing a lot of crisis across all the districts around the homeless, houseless population. How is that going specifically in SDIC? I mean, I want to make sure your staff are not impeded on their activities and especially their safety is not compromised.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I was going to touch on that with the 40-mile loop project, but historically, there's the houseless population in SDIC is there's not a big impact on our day-to-day operations. There's random stuff. Who knows if it's houseless or not, throwing stuff in ditches from time to time, but there's at our double barrels right as it goes underneath Marine Drive into the SDIC pump station, we see a little bit of activity, and that's generally maybe an abandoned vehicle or people dumping trash. And recently I've been working with the Hope team out there on a couple incidents in the last 6 months, just abandoned vehicles or stolen vehicles, and they were on it, and they really were responsive and got it out of there. So there's a little bit, but it's nothing like the other 3 districts that really impacts day-to-day operations. There's a big houses community out there on the Sandy River, and further east of Sundial Road out there in the woods and stuff. But they're far enough away from our infrastructure. They don't generally cause too many issues or safety issues for MCD staff. So, can I get those slides up again, Wendy? Please. And then here, I threw a couple photos. This is, you can see some water that's being held back on the left here. This is when the weir was up and starting to hold water back. And then on the right is, once we felt like we're in a good spot and our pumps are starting to draw down, we open up those gates and you can see there's a ton of water. So that can take a while to drain down depending on how much we hold back. But like I said before, it worked really well. And we have been in the last couple of years using this, and we talk about it a lot, how fortunate we are to have that structure, because it would be a lot tougher if we didn't. I think everybody knows that the pump station's undersized currently with all the growth and everything, how much water goes into the system now. So, and then one other, if you go to the next slide, Wendy, please. There's another project that I wanted to bring to your attention that definitely, there's potential impact to operations, is the 40-mile loop. We recently just got, so that basically from Sundial Road west on the levee system to our pump station, and then it crosses over to Marine Drive. They're going to be paving the top of those levees. And, historically, we don't really see any activity out there. When the levees aren't paved, it's tougher for people to navigate them. And but with that coming, we are planning for the worst, hoping for the best. And that project, I think, is going to be starting late spring, and that could bring some, I guess, more exposure to, like, say, our pump station and in the weir structure. There's going to be more people navigating it, and potentially those houses communities spending more time and navigating in through those sections. So, we're trying to be thoughtful about that going into the budget season, potentially bumping up or putting a little more funding in potential cleanup, stuff like that with rapid response or contractor, and we kind of have one last little chance to have input on these plans, because it hasn't gone out to bid yet. But I think there's one bollard they've planned for. I think we'll ask for 2, just trying to make it more difficult to get into that area. And if all else fails, like we currently have, we have eco blocks. But this definitely could bring a little more activity just to this area that, for the most part, is kind of out there doing its own thing, and we don't have to deal with much of it. So a real positive thing for the community, but need to be thinking about how that's going to affect us, and we are. So
And just as background, this is a project that's been planned for a number of years, probably 4 or 5 years. It's from a Metro grant that has federal funding access that ODOT is doing on behalf of the port and the city of Troutdale under multiple AGAs. And it will connect into the urban renewal area eventually up in Troutdale. So the city has been a big advocate of this, as well as city of Fairview. The grant was actually issued to Fairview, and then they got into they ended up having some staffing issues to resource it, so the port stepped in and assumed the grant while we were developing TRIP. It's just a lag behind a bit. Also in that area will be a new, I think the state's largest battery storage facility, TRIP Lot 12, that BPA recently sold to Troutdale Grid. And so there'll be quite a bit of activity and pushing further along that that levee area that otherwise hasn't been disturbed.
Yeah,
Right.
and go ahead.
Brandon, just saying thank you for the update. I just recognized in our our time and our agenda, any other items you need to convey? And we welcome you back to any meetings. I do really appreciate hearing what's going on the ground.
Yeah, no, I think that's plenty, and I just would leave with I think the system's in good, it's functioning and it's functioning well, and it takes a lot of effort during these rain events and stuff, but with the weir and dedicated staff, we're keeping it going, and yeah, so I'm sure more rain events and things will come along the way, but I think we're in pretty good shape.
Mr.
Cheers,
Chair,
bro.
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, can I spend a minute just to add a couple more thoughts to Randy's comments, and then
That sounds great, Bill. Go ahead.
thank you. I appreciate it. Stephen, if you don't know, I'm Bill Owen. I'm the chief engineer at the district, and so I help support Randy and his team. Just a follow-up because on a couple things Randy said, because he was very complete. The comments you made about some of the biggest concern that we have with operations, to me, is the pump. It's the Sandy pump station. It functions properly if everything works well. If there's a power outage or we have a really big event, then we're in trouble because we don't have backup power out there, and nor do we have a clean way to switch to diesel power as a backup system. There's not a transfer switch you can just flip and plug in a diesel generator. So you have to have a licensed electrician to come out, which is fine to do as long as it's not at 11 p.m. In the middle of the night, where it may be more difficult to get someone out there, and you only have a couple hours when flooding starts happening, including PG&E's substation nearby. As you have not experienced yet, but the rest of the board knows that the pump station is just too low in elevation. So when there's big enough rain events, it's just not going to be able to keep up, and it has a potential to flood more quickly than it should. So the pump station's redundancy and resiliency is something that's concerning for me. I'm glad that the PMLS project is going to be addressing that as part of the work. So it's super critical for us to be able to make sure that that's successful. The other thing, and I'm going to work with Jim and Wendy and others to get a CIP update here, hopefully in the next board meeting. But because of the 40-mile loop project moving forward, it's unlikely that our original assumptions for your current capital project that deals with gate replacements will go forward as planned. Some of those gates are going to be removed and bollards installed where the gates were, and those were the gates that we were planning to replace. So either that project will completely go away or it'll be refocused to other locations. So we'll be providing a board update soon about that. Yeah, and there's an interest in maybe putting a little more material on the levee system to make operations a little easier along the bend between where the Columbia River and the Sandy levees meet. It's pretty steep out there, and sometimes the mowers can slip and cause some rutting. And so we may be putting some more material out there. And so you might see a budget request next year with that in mind. So a couple things to keep in mind moving forward, and I'll be back later this fiscal year to say more. Appreciate the extra time.
Thanks, Bill. Stephen or Ken, any follow-up questions for Bill?
I'm good, thank you.
I guess on the pump station, so if it sits low in elevation and has potential of being flooded itself, I assume if the station gets flooded, it fails. then the bad situation gets a lot worse real quick.
Correct. There is a fallback potentially with the Columbia River is low enough. There's actually a gravity flow system. There are two pipes next to the pump station that go through the levee, but Salmon Creek has to be physically higher than the Columbia River. So we could open up those gates and draw the water down. Normally, that only happens 4 to 6 weeks out of the year and in the fall. So the Christmas time would not, Salmon Creek would have to rise really high in order to get it down. So we would likely see some flooding. And as I mentioned earlier, the first concern I have is the PGE substation, which is part of our backup system.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that substation is pretty close to the pump station.
And I'll, as I kind of move into the role, I'll definitely want to understand the infrastructure a lot better. But does this system rely on a single pump house with? It sounded like there were 2 pumps in there. Is that what we have?
Yes, there are 2 pumps in there, and which means it has just enough. It has enough capacity to deal with what's built right now. It has very little capacity of what is planned to be built out there.
Gotcha.
And ideally, you would increase the capacity of the pump station. So let's say 2 bigger pumps. But what you really want to do is add a 3rd pump for redundancy in case one pump goes down, or for maintenance, or just as there's an issue. So those are 2 things. So capacity and redundancy is something we could deal with for design, as well as resiliency by increasing the height, the first floor operations, as well as backup power. So lots of needs there. So far, we've dodged the bullets on any big storms out there, and there's been no major failures, equipment failures, or very long power outages.
Okay, thanks for that background.
Randy, thanks for the updates. Stephen and Annalise, you're both are new board members. I think maybe this spring we could do a tour of the area. The pandemic kind of shut those down, but I think maybe this spring, when the weather's a little bit more favorable, and as it fits into your calendars, perhaps we can get the board out there and do a drive around or a hike or whatever. Seeing it firsthand I think is very valuable. So
There's some nice stuff out there too.
Great.
If you like levees. So moving on, Colin has an update on the levy grant contract that we're looking at with Oregon Business.
I do. I will try to make it as brief as possible, try to get you all back on schedule, but there are a lot of acronyms and initialisms related to this, so I will try to explain those for Stephen's benefit and for everyone's. Hi, I'm Colin Rowan. I'm the Director of Planning and Public Affairs, and this update is on the levy grant contract, but I do need to give a little bit of background just for general understanding. We were awarded in 2018 a feasibility study with the Army Corps of Engineers. That project became the Portland Metro Levy Study System Study. So you'll hear us say PMLS a lot. It identified about $120 million of improvements that were needed throughout the full system. So that's all 4 districts in Sandy Drainage Improvement Company. Nice segue from Bill. The Army Corps of Engineers identified the need to replace and elevate the Sandy pump station, and also include automatic trash rakes to be able to clear it without having someone out there operating it. Replacing what's called the head wall right behind the pump station, which was oversaturated in previous rain events and has what's called a relief well that relieves pressure from the backside of that levee. And then about a mile of the levee just to the east of the pump station will have additional material placed on the inside of it. And then there's a small fix down on the south east corner of the system where on-ramp from Graham Road onto I-84 basically notched, cut down part of the levee. And so that needs to be rebuilt, reinforced. And so during your orientation, we'll be able to give you a lot more information on that, Stephen. The Army Corps of Engineers, as mentioned, found a federal interest in moving to the design and construction phase of this project. So the next phase is called pre-construction engineering design. So you'll hear us call that PED, P-E-D. And that is about a $12 million phase, which will do all of the design, permitting work for the construction phase that would come afterward. The SDIC board, along with the other 3 drainage district boards, have been contemplating how to pay the non-federal share of that $12 million phase. So the non-federal share, both of the design and construction phase, is 35%. So federal government is putting $2 in for every $1 that we're putting in locally. Going back a few years, we helped the state of Oregon, or advocated for the legislature to create a levy grant program that's part of the Infrastructure Finance Authority. And so that is part of, it's lottery funded. It is administered by the Oregon Business Development Department, also known as Business Oregon. And then we've helped craft and advocate for what was previously a loan program to become a grant program. And so we identified that that grant program would be a really good source for funding the local match. And the contract that you have in your packet is the contract based on our application to award those funds to SDIC. And so SDIC's portion of that non-federal share is a $1.12 million contract, plus 20% of that is also cash that the SDIC board will need to appropriate annually to be able to tap into those Business Oregon grant funds. So there's no action required. So I don't want to dig too deep into this, but I do want to highlight that there is a one-pager that sort of describes the history of this and what the next steps look like. And then also there's the actual contract. Armand on our legal team has helped craft a resolution that would be going to the board in February. He also shared the contract with Mr. Brian Sheets, your legal counsel. There were a few requests for us to explore with Business Oregon that we're going to be doing in the next few weeks. And then the goal is to have that contract to be approved for signature by the board chair at your February meeting. And so a little bit more work to be done, just as far as seeing if any of the terms can be adjusted or clarified. But overall, this is really great progress being awarded this grant from Business Oregon, having most all of the local share being paid for through this. And I do just want to share a couple other notes. I definitely buried the lead here, but a couple other happy notes to share. And this was sent out on January 6th to all the boards. But in the mad rush in Washington, D.C. at the end of December, 2 big pieces related to the PMLS were decided. So first and foremost is that we received in WRDA, the Water Resources Development Act of 2022 was included as part of the National Defense Authorization Act, which was a massive $1 trillion package. But WRDA 22 included a construction authorization for our PMLS project. So that is basically an act of Congress saying that they have authorized this construction. There were 6 flood risk management projects nationwide that received this authorization. It does require continued annual appropriations. It requires us to continue to fund it locally, but it is a huge hurdle to get over and it's definitely worth celebrating. The other important piece of news is we do have to have that annual appropriation. And so for the first year of PED, the pre-construction engineering design, in the large appropriations omnibus package, $3.77 million were appropriated to fund the first year of PED. So what's really important about getting into that first appropriation drop is that it really signals the federal government's interest in continuing this project and moving it forward, and really getting over the hurdle of that first annual appropriation is most important. We will need to continue to advocate for this project, but it really, usually once it is started, it is something that is signaled as a priority in the Army Corps' work plan. So this is really great news, and we should be receiving some funding at the Portland district level very soon, so we can start actually negotiating a design agreement and really start this PED phase in earnest sometime later this spring. So that only went 3 minutes over, and I'll take any questions at this time. And actually, just do want to open it up for a minute for Armand, if there's any other kind of process pieces, especially related to the contract.
No, I don't think so, Colin. Thank you. I think that was well said.
Any questions for Armand or Colin? I do want to recognize Annalise Kohler did join the meeting. Annalise, can you confirm you're present?
Yes, I'm present. Thank you. And I
Yeah,
have no
great.
questions.
Great to have you. So SDIC board is in quorum.
Tom, Mr. Chair, if I can, there's just one other piece of news that is related. I know there's lots of swirling pieces here. I did mention I mentioned the levy grant program, which we accessed and tapped into all 4 districts to be able to pay for PED. That is something that is part of the Oregon state budget, sort of their 2-year budget. And so we have worked with our contract lobbyist, Mark Landauer, who's worked with legislators both in the House and the Senate to introduce similar bills for this 2023 long session. So House Bill, I just wrote it down and lost where I put it. House Bill 2307 and Senate Bill 634 have both been introduced, pre-session filed, and they will, they're mirror images. It's sort of based on which committee takes them and how we want to best advance it. But this will be another $15 million designation for Business Oregon to replenish that levy grant fund. It benefits levy operators throughout the state. 60% of those funds need to go to non-urban levy systems, but 40% can go to urban levy systems, which is basically R4 drainage districts, and then small districts outside of Eugene and outside of Salem. So it's a really great opportunity, and it really is a strong signal from at least the state legislators that have supported this, that there's a statewide in investing in this levy infrastructure, and we'll continue to advocate for that. Thanks for the additional minute.
Thanks, Colin. Hey, I did have a question on the contract with Oregon Business Development. So, you know, it just kind of, I saw the completion date. You know, we have a target of what, March 31st, 2026. Is there a is there a contingency in there, or is, I mean, just what's our confidence, and do we have the capacity to extend this? I mean, I just want to know, is that a fail safe, or do we have any cushion on that timeline?
There is a cushion, and but it will be related to what funding is available. And so, for example, with our Infrastructure Finance Authority loan, the loan number 2 that Multnomah County administers, the state has been willing to add 5-year extensions based on when we need to tap into the funding. So there is the ability to amend it, but it is based on how much money is left in. You know, they do a bond sale based on the lottery bonds, and so what is available, I think, will influence that. So the goal remains to have the PED phase completed by 2026. But to your question, there is the ability to extend it.
Very good. That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you. Having seen no other questions for Colin or Armand, we'll move on to the board appointment. Thanks again. So item D, board appointment of Stephen Winkle. Again, Annalise, we did an introduction of Stephen at the start. He comes in to replace Ken Anderton. You know, that's a big lift, as we shared earlier, but we have confidence in all the port's representatives. So let's see, we need a, so Stephen, do you want to just do a little introduction?
Sure, yeah, I could do that. Drainage district business is new to me, but my tenure with the port in various capacities has been mostly in real estate and capital projects. Been with the port in total 3 different tours for totaling up to about 17 years, mostly in the aviation side. A lot of focus with the Portland International Airport, a little bit with the Troutdale Airport. Last handful of years have definitely gotten a lot more involved on industrial development, things associated with our industrial parks. I've been on Ken Anderton's team a number of years, and yeah, I'm looking forward to branching out and learning a lot more about this and being involved. Sorry, Tom, I think you're muted.
Thank you. So just a point of clarification, do you prefer Steve or Stephen? I see both.
I don't actually have a preference. Steve is great.
Okay, great. I just want to call you the name you prefer. So
Thank you.
So Wendy, we're looking for a motion for his acceptance.
Appointment, I believe, is the right word.
So is there a consideration of appointment of Steve Winkle to the vacant SDIC seat, or the seat that will replace Ken Anderson?
Are you looking for a second? I'll second that.
Oh,
Motion made by Ken and seconded by Annalise.
Ken, can you just repeat your motion, please?
Yeah, I motion that Steve Winkle, who I've known for almost 16, 17 years, and worked in a lot of different projects at the port, will capably be able to execute the duties of a board member. And thus, I would love to be the one to suggest the board consider his appointment.
And Annalise, you're going to second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. So I'm just going to go for a voice vote here. I don't, since this isn't a resolution. So do we have a voice vote for Stephen Winkle's appointment? All supporting, say aye.
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 And all supported, so there's no dissenting votes. So we have a motion carries. Stephen, thank you. Welcome to the SDIC board. You have a great team of MCDD staff supporting you in your effort here.
Great, thank you.
And Steve, I'll work with you to get your oath of office signed, and then you'll be a voting member.
Okay.
Let's see, we are on to our finance officer. Welcome, Lori.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Lori Baker, the Director of Finance and Administration for the district. I'm going to share my screen. All right, let's just jump right over. So this is a summary of the financial report that's included in your packet. This is actual results through the month of November. So in this report, you can see both the revenues and expenditures through November, and the revised budget column shows the corrected budget that you approved last month at our meeting. So The actual revenues and expenditures here are through the month of November. And the variance column for the revenues shows a negative variance where actual revenues are lower than the budget for the year. And for the expenditures, a positive number means expenditures are less than the annual budget. Since we're not quite halfway through the year, we are fortunately running under budget on all of those things. So that's a good thing. So assessment revenues here begin to be received in the month of November, similar to what you see with property taxes. They are billed in conjunction with the district residents' property tax bills. And much of this anticipated revenue will be collected by the end of December. So we normally collect between 95 and 96% of our assessments imposed each year, and we're not anticipating any changes in that collection rate in the current year. Other revenues that you see here are primarily interest earnings. So far this year, we've collected just over $9,800 in interest earnings, and then the rest of that is just other miscellaneous revenues. The levee and drainage system maintenance and fixed fee administration includes the first quarter of the fixed fees for the year. So you will see that those amounts that are billed quarterly will show up as a fixed amount as we approved earlier in the year. And professional services are well below budget, with reduced spending primarily occurring in the legal services area. The budget planned for legal services related to the dissolution in the current year, and those services are still in the beginning stages. So there's a timing difference here with those expenditures. We will likely need to carry forward some of this funding into the upcoming 23-24 budget. And with that, I can take any questions. Let me see if I can stop sharing. Any questions on the financials for November? All right.
Seeing no or hearing no questions. Thank you so much, Lori.
Thank you.
So item F, starting our budget discussion. It seems like budget never stops. But here we are looking at our FY 23-24 budget planning. And
It's
looks
just
like
a
we got Lori
continuous
back up.
cycle, isn't it? Yeah, we just finish one budget and start into the next. So I'm going to share my screen here. Yeah. Okay, so today is the first in a series of discussions we'll be having related to the SDIC budget for the upcoming fiscal year. Today, we're going to take a look at the budget calendar so you can have a sense of our next steps in the budget process. We'll also be looking at the forecast for the current year. This forecast process is an essential part of our budget process as it informs our estimates for project budgets that need to be carried forward into the next year, carry forward fund balances that will provide funding for next year's budget, and also give us a sense of spending patterns to be considered in the upcoming budget process. We're also going to take a look at the current staffing levels at MCDD so that you're aware of where we're at with that. And finally, we'll talk a bit about planning for the upcoming budget. We'll be presenting a draft list of budget priorities and also be asking for some initial guidance on possible increases to assessment rates for the upcoming year. So this is our budget calendar showing key dates in the upcoming budget process. We're at step 1 currently, with the presentation of our kickoff of the budget season and our review of the current year forecast. We'll be updating that forecast as we get closer to the approved budget to ensure that we're on track to provide the level of fund balance carry forward that we're currently projecting. Staff are currently working diligently on their department budgets for each district, and these efforts will be consolidated into a budget proposal for you to review. And in April, we'll bring that proposed budget for your review and discussion. In May, we'll bring back any updates to the proposed budget and ask you to consider the updated version for approval. And in June, you'll adopt the budget that will begin operating under on July 1. Just to note, We are not subject to Oregon local budget law here at the district, but we do try to follow a similar process so that we have some structure to the process and so that the board has a good opportunity and some transparency in the planning and the numbers that we have included in the budget. So in your package, you have a detailed version of the forecasted financial results for the current fiscal year, and this is a summary of that forecast. Materials and services are projected to be 49,000 lower than the budget, with a positive variance in legal services that will need to be considered for carryover into the upcoming fiscal year budget due to the timing of that legal work related to the transition to the urban district. Capital outlay has a positive variance due to timing of projects, with the PMLS project and SCADA system upgrades identified for potential carryover into the next fiscal year in 23-24. And the ending fund balance is 600,000 higher than budget, but you'll see on future slides that we anticipate most of this positive variance lands in the carry forward of capital commitments. As we discussed, capital spending has some timing differences, which are anticipated to result in the carry forward of $545,000 into the upcoming budget. We'll refine this amount as we get closer to the end of the year and also refine for timing of any grant dollars supporting these capital acquisitions. This slide shows our projected fiscal year end fund balances. The pie chart shows the allocation of the balance, with 48% of the balance being restricted for capital spending. Moving to the bar chart at the right, you can see the comparison of our projected fund balances by category to our last 2 years of audited balances. So you can see that capital reserve is growing, and that really is the timing differences of that project spending. This slide shows the level of MCDD staffing in the current year budget by category. The chart on the bottom shows the detail by department. We currently have 4 open positions that will be posted in the upcoming weeks. We actually have a couple of those that have been posted now, including an engineering position, 2 operations positions, and a position in public affairs. And I'll give a little kudos to my HR department. They've actually implemented an automated HR system. And so our postings of those jobs are up and live on the new system, and everything is electronic. So our managers that are posting those positions have been kind of our test data, and we've been able to move forward with that electronic posting, which is great because it gives us kind of a wider opportunity of posting to different websites, including a government job site. So we're looking forward to seeing how that electronic process works and whether we can get some additional interest in those positions. So the key takeaways in our financial projections for SDIC are detailed on this slide. We'll be starting 23-24 with more carry forward operating fund balances. The board may want to consider spending down this balance as we move forward into the transition of the urban district. We've got some decisions to make about assessment rate increases. We implemented a rate increase in the 22-23 fiscal year, and we'll need board direction on rate increases for the upcoming year as well. In capital projects, staff are pulling together the CIP for the upcoming year, as you heard earlier, and we'll also have some carry forward projects coming from the current year budget. This slide is our draft proposed budget priorities for the upcoming year. At the top is meeting our core mission of flood protection and prevention. As we watch the impact of the weather-related flooding to our south in California, this mission becomes even more critical. Our employees are a very close second. They keep our operations going and provide that flood protection for our district. Their safety is of the utmost importance and should continue to be a priority. getting the urban district up and running in order to address funding issues and to streamline governance to allow further support for the hundreds of millions of dollars of capital support we're poised to receive is also a priority. Leading to the advancement of the PMLS and FEMA capital projects is also a priority. And finally, providing adequate support services to allow for compliance is our final priority. So with that, I am going to pull down my screen. And I can take questions at this point. Also hoping to get some feedback on assessment increases so that we can run those numbers through the preliminary budget. If you all have some guidance on that. With that, I'll stop talking so that I can take questions.
Questions for Lori?
If I could ask a super newbie question, how do we
Sure.
generally, what's the methodology for assessing or setting the new assessment levels? What have we typically done in the past?
So it has varied in the past. Last year, the assessment increase was a 3%. So I can bring back to the board a history of those assessments and the collections and all of that information. It has really been dependent upon some of the capital funding needs for the district, as well as just overall funding needs. We have a fixed fee arrangement now for the MCDD staff for the work that they do to support the maintenance of the system, as well as the administrative support for the district. So we know what those numbers will look like, but it also has been really driven by those capital needs and the risk prioritization of those projects.
So basically just meet budgeted expenses, or is it budgeted expenses plus some amount of cushion? Or
there's not been an amount of cushion. Typically in the past, it's been meet the highest risk projects and the budgeted expenditures.
Just
Okay,
give you a
thank you.
sense, 9% increase across the board on all 4 legacy districts. And again, this is an estimate, generates in the current fiscal year about $500,000, which really didn't even cover our laws and healthcare cost increases, retirement cost increases. So things are tight. And SDIC has a history recently, and Tom, you probably know better, or Brian, of going through a series of very, very significant rate increases. So we're working really hard to minimize those increases going forward, which is one of the reasons Lori mentioned reserves as we move to this new funding mechanism, trying to do right by our landowners.
And Laura, you teed up a policy discussion as far as, we have a healthy unobligated fund balance. And, do we draw that down, avoid a large rate increase and draw that down? This is in anticipation of dissolution, right? That could
This
be
is correct.
less than 2 years away. So does this board leave $1 million for the new district of the new government to assume? Or do we draw those funds down to a lower amount? So that's something this board is going to have to wrestle with. And Tanny is being our kind of our treasurer or budget liaison. I think his participation in that discussion will be imperative. So Stephen, you asked a great question. We have to look at the whole picture. We have a healthy reserve set aside, and I have full confidence. A GO bond will be successful, and we'll all be excited about what the future holds. So it's really a play on what do we think the future holds. So I think that's a discussion we want to bring back maybe for our next meeting with Tanny present, because I know he'll want to chime in on any budget planning.
That sounds good. Thank you.
I would also offer that these abstract conversations are somewhat challenging for me to visualize, is it possible to have a couple of different scenarios in the next meeting to talk about like what it would look like if we were to pull up on reserves versus what it would look like if we were to do a rather large rate increase? I think that, or assessment increase, I think that that would be helpful for, maybe something in the middle would be helpful for me to kind of understand what we're talking about here.
Absolutely. That's a great idea. Thank you, Annalise.
I think we proposed 9% last year, and with Tammy's leadership, that was reduced to 3%. And I think the net change was 60,000.
Mhm.
Just to give you an order of magnitude, Annalisa, and again, we'll prepare more detailed and documents for you to hold and look at and refer to. But
I
just to
think,
give you a sense of scale.
too, that the SDIC had pushed through some very significant, we're about 3 or 4 years increases. And that's how we got to that healthy reserve number. We paid down the loans that we had also in place with Multnomah County. So, there's been some fiscal conservative thought gone into that. And that's why we reduced, I think, the rates last year, if I recall. But certainly is a great idea, Annalise, is showing you that delta between rates and what that does to the drawdown. We also have, a big capital project on the books if the GO bond wasn't successful. So then I think that was some of the thought processes we wanted to go in terms of the new district into a whole situation that our infrastructure was mostly paid for, where our down payment on the grant matching funds was paid for.
Lori, thinking back what Bill had shared in his presentation, I thought he said the access gate improvements was not going to occur this year. And I think in your forecasting, you anticipated it would be done. So
yeah, we have some unique timing differences when it comes to forecasting. So staff worked on those forecasts and completed them so that I could get it ready for this board meeting, and then, received new information after that forecast was pulled together.
yeah, you can only try to put an engineer in a box, if they just find a way out.
Yes, and that's why one of the things that I said is we'll take a look at that forecast and get that updated before we approve the budget to make sure that we have the most current information possible. It's always challenging for the engineers and project managers when I come to them in December and say, what's that going to look like at June 30th? Particularly when you have projects that are dependent on the weather and really need to start work in the May-June timeframe. Depending on what happens, those things may shift a little bit. So it's always a balancing act for them. And we try to do the best that we can to make sure that we've defined those numbers. But yeah, they're, like I always say about budget, the minute I print the numbers on the paper, it's wrong. So that's what you're seeing here, is just that timing difference.
Thank you. Any additional questions for Lori? Again, thank you, Lori, for your wise and insightful feedback and comments on our financial position.
Thank you.
So at this time, I think we're going into item G. Is that correct, Wendy?
Yeah, we're ahead of schedule. And I've been advised that the finance staff could drop off for the executive session, and then if at the board's discretion, you could invite Steve, even though he hasn't signed his oath yet, to participate.
So let's see. Just so for clarification, so Steve, I'm not sure on, any discussion on having Stephen participate in this executive session, having not signed his oath. Annalise or Ken or Brian, or Hong, any insight on that?
I think I'm fine with it.
I'm fine as well.
Yeah, I think he's been appointed. It's just a the certification is just the last formal step.
Sounds
Yep.
good.
I agree.
Okay, so let me pull this back up here. Sorry. So moving into executive session on the PMLS real estate discussion. The board will convene in executive session for the purpose of discussing information and confidential legal advice or attorney-client communications exempt or otherwise protected from public disclosure under the Federal Freedom of Information Act. Per statute 5.U.S.C 552, subsection B, subsection 5, or state public law, ORS 192.345, section 6, or ORS 192.355, subsection 8, and ORS section 9, subsection A, ORS 192.660, section 2, subsection F, and ORS 40.225. Boy, that is a mouthful.
Mr. Chair, I just want to check, the staff that are present are all pretty instrumental to the real estate work. So with your approval, I'd like them to be able to remain. The others have departed, but